Hey, what's going on, guys? CodedSteele, and I'm going to show you how to make a game timer using AppInventor. So, first off, this timer does not have any practical use whatsoever. It incorporates as it is, I should say. It does have uses. It's just the way it is right now, and it uses three different ways of creating a timer. So you would, in theory, if you're making an application, you're not going to make it work using three different timers. You would make it with one of these examples. But I had a discussion going back and forth with somebody about how to make this. And, I said, well, I'm working on this activity starter tutorial right now. I really don't have time to be focusing on this, but I ended up doing it anyway because really I kind of wanted some of your guys' feedback for the activity starter. So for those of you that want to see an activity starter tutorial, if you could please leave a comment at the bottom of the video saying what examples in particular you would like to see with the activity starter tutorial. Like, would you like me to see turn Bluetooth on? Would you like starting certain applications? What kind of demonstrations do you want to see with the activity starter tutorial? So that's kind of the feedback I'm looking for. And again, something else I want to mention. So that should be our next video, is the activity starter tutorial. Following that, hopefully I will get to the Firebase tutorial. And then from there, we will move on and try to come up with other tutorials. Something else I wanted to mention, and I kind of want your guys' feedback on this. I have the ability, possibly, to maybe start doing live streaming 1 day a week, probably on Saturdays here. So I live in the central time zone in the United States, and ideally it would maybe start at like 7 or 8 o'clock at night on a Saturday. I don't know if that works for everybody, but if I can get responses out of any of you guys as far as what time you would like to see the live stream at, maybe I can try to make it a different day of the week. But right now I'm thinking Saturday. So the only way this is going to happen is if I get enough feedback from you guys saying you would want something like this. So what it would essentially be is a question and answers seminar. So you guys would be able to provide questions ahead of the stream, and I would answer those questions on stream and possibly even answer some questions while the stream is going on. You guys could leave a comment in the feed, and I would search for what you guys are responding back with, what you want to see. The only way this is going to happen is, like I said, if I get enough people who want to see it. So I'm thinking probably somewhere between 50 and 100 people would need to say they're interested in something like this. Otherwise, before I would even consider doing it. Otherwise, we would just stick with these video tutorials, and my thoughts would be after the live stream's over, I would post it to my channel and then it would be on there. So that's something to consider. If you guys are interested in me doing a live stream once a week, comment back, suggest a time for that, and we will try to come up with something and possibly some topics. So thinking maybe if I get responses fast enough, we could start that up. Probably not the next Saturday, but the following, which would probably be February, if I get enough responses by then. If not, I'd wait until I had enough people saying they're interested. So, alrighty, moving on to the game timer. This game timer, like I said, works off of three principles. So it is not applicable in its current form. You would need to choose which one of these ways you want to count down. And right now, that's what this thing does, is it counts down from an hour. You can change that. It's physically changeable in the code, and I will show you where to change all of that stuff. But as of this moment, it counts down from 1 hour. So the way it works here, the way I have my app working, is I have two horizontal arrangements here. I have a horizontal arrangement with a label 1 in it that's invisible, and then I have a horizontal arrangement that is inside of that, of horizontal arrangement 1, and I put label 2 where it needs to be. So how I do this is, in the horizontal arrangement, I have it aligning to the right, and then I have label 1, which aligns to the left, which is the default of the horizontal arrangement. Oh, no, they both align to the right. Okay, well, whatever. the way this will work, label 1 will show up over here. Right now it's invisible because the timer only appears when you lose a life. So right now the life counter is 3. 3 is where your lives start. You lose a life, it counts. Right now I just have a button that does that. Obviously, if you had a game or whatever, maybe you would have it when you collide with an enemy. So you would change your event from this button click to a collision if you were using that. So, but obviously, this is just for, just showing you guys how Game Timer works. So I have this button, these 2 horizontal arrangements, 1 inside of the horizontal arrangement, 2 inside of horizontal arrangement 1 with the lives visible, and label 1 invisible. So I think I can make label 1 visible for a second here, and you can see where it shows up. It shows up right there to the left of this. So that kind of makes it to where my timer appears over here and my lives appear over here. So just so you guys can kind of see that all. Button, just lose a life, it's button, whatever. And then a spinner component. And the spinner is how you select the timing method you want to use. So you've got 3 options. You have got an in-game timer, you've got a phone timer, and you have a web timer. All of them have their advantages and disadvantages, and I will explain all of those thoroughly as to how they all work and what my preferred method of counting down would be, even though obviously they all have disadvantages to themselves. So, all right. Then we have a clock 1, tiny database, clock 2, clock 3, web 1. This is an extremely complicated application the way it is right now because of the 3 timers. You have to take into account not letting the timers conflict with each other and all of that stuff. So there's a lot there. This app will obviously be posted to my YouTube channel like all of them have been. That's obviously been a viewer request all the time. Hey, can you please post your application code? Absolutely. Like I said, I'm very much, the whole purpose of this channel is to help you guys out. That's all I'm really trying to do. Give you guys ideas, help grow the app base out there, help grow the app industry. So the only way to do that is to create more people who can do apps. So that's where you guys come in. All right. Now we'll kind of dig into where everything's at. I think this, for the most part, is pretty simple. The Web 1 URL is this. It's this script, Google user content, blah, blah, blah. It's this huge, long URL. It's just like I said, the app's going to be posted, so you guys will have the URL in the application. But more on this later. I'll get into what that all is later. All right. Digging into the code. The code itself is relatively simple. We can kind of see the spinner. The spinner selection starts out as in-game. So when I say in-game timer, essentially what I mean is the timer is 100% independent of the phone system time. And now I'm going to explain some of the advantages to that. So here's an advantage to the in-game timer. It can only count in-game. So if I lose a life, all right, now I have a 59.99 minute count. I have 60 minutes to count up to before I regain the life. That application will only count those seconds when the app is on. So the app has to be, running in the background or visible on the screen in one of those forms. Obviously, there's some huge disadvantages to that. Leaving an application open consumes your battery life. So now I have to have my application open in order for my game to be counting. But at the same time, an advantage to that, I don't know if you guys know this, but there is a phone hack. There are certain applications out there with games, and I'm sure some of you know this and some of you don't, but for example, I think Candy Crush is one of them. For if I run out of lives in Candy Crush, I can adjust my phone time, and by adjusting my phone time, I can cheat the life system and regain all of my lives. So I can essentially set the time to a later date or later time and go back into the game, and all my lives will be refilled. And then just set the time back to the time zone, the actual time. So, obviously that, if you know that, that's a huge flaw in the timer design, now you're defeating the purpose of having a timer. You want, somebody to have to wait before they can do something. That's how you create your anticipation and possibly create content, purchasable content, like maybe purchasing more lives or something like that. So now with that major exploit, there's no reason to do that anymore. So sorry to the app industry for exposing that huge flaw, but that's the whole purpose of these videos, is to teach you guys about how to take advantage of all things within an application, and ultimately be able to create an app that's close to flawless, or as flawless as it can possibly be. So anyways, we need to start talking about code. I've been wasting way too much time. So you got an in-game timer. It only counts when the application's open or running in the background. Simple enough, right? So that's automatically selected by default. This builds the list for the spinner. Pretty simple. I think we've discussed that in past videos. Then you've got all this other stuff. You've got this global countdown status, global life counter, global time countdown, global clock type, global old time. Global clock countdown status is whether we should count, whether it should be counting. By default, since we have 3 lives, the answer is no, we don't want to be counting. So that's false. As soon as you begin the app for the first time, it's not going to want to count because you do not have a reason to. You have 3 lives. You're not counting down if you got 3 lives. So that is how that is working. Global life counter, you're going to start with 3. So as soon as the app begins, there are 3 lives. That's just where you're going to start. All right, and if you don't have 3 lives, if you lost a life, that will obviously get stored when we do the store value for the lives, which I'll show you guys a little bit later. And you got the global time countdown. Time countdown is just your time counter. So if you have 3,600 seconds you're waiting or whatever, that's where that number gets stored. Every time the clock counter gets updated, the countdown counter clock gets updated, that will obviously get stored in here, and then every time the app re-begins, we'll be able to load that information and have that information. So part of what the request was an application timer that has memory, hence the reason for the database. If I did not have memory, as soon as I close the application, the timer doesn't remember where it's at. So not exactly what we want. We wanted something that lasted with power down and whatever else. So that's that. Clock type, like I said, there's 3 different clock types. There's the in-game, there's the phone timer, and then there's the web timer. By default, it will be in-game if there's not a clock type tag in the database. Old time is a, let's see here, how do we explain old time? Old time is the last recorded milliseconds for the timer. The reason why we need that is for the phone time and the web time count methods. It's not necessarily used for the in-game method, but it is used for the phone time and the web time methods. The in-game method is by far the simplest method to implement, in my opinion. So that one will not make use of this old time tag. The only time that will get used is when you are using the phone time or the web time based counters. All right, then we got the spinner one selection, get global clock type. We're just setting whatever the spinner's displaying to whatever the clock type was that was selected by, that's selected. And obviously that has memory, so that's this. Whatever the clock type is, that will get set to whatever the spinner selection is. Call initialize clock based on the clock type. Essentially, we go over here. That's a procedure. Call initialize clock. That does all of this good stuff over here. So we got 3 clock types. In-game, the clock 1 is enabled, and then clock 2 and clock 3 are disabled. In phone time, this is enabled, these are false. And then in this one, these are false and these are true. Web counter is specifically used for the web event. So the web counter one was kind of tricky. I don't want to constantly be querying this web server for the time. So in order to do that, I had to add another variable that essentially says, true, and it will disable the timer. Well, this is true. It'll re-enable the timer as soon as it gets the time and whatever, blah, 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 blah. So I needed a separate variable in order to be able to do that effectively. So that's the essentially the other variable. So this is all extremely hard to explain, so I'm very sorry if I'm not doing a very good job of explaining it. But like I said, as always, if you have any questions, you can always send me an email or leave a comment below, and I will try to explain the particular thing you don't understand in more detail. So the first one we're going to discuss is the in-game timer. So if we go over here, these are all of our variables that we have here. These are life counter, time countdown, countdown status, old time, clock type, web counter, all that good stuff. All right, here's our first timer here that I kind of unexpanded because, man, it's very bulky. So, like I said, none of this stuff is extremely straightforward. This is probably the most straightforward one, but still, I mean, there's a lot here. So I'm going to zoom out on this so we can see all of the stuff that's going on. All right. Oh, my goodness. Okay, so if we start out with the in-game counter method, and we have 3 lives right off the jump, none of this stuff is going to happen. So how do we lose a life? Well, if you guys remember, we saw that push button method, right? So if my life counter is greater than 0, my life counter is going to be the life counter minus 1. So essentially, I'm going to take 1 away from my life counter as long as it's greater than 0. Obviously, if I don't have this condition in here, my lives can go negative. I don't know how lives can go negative in a video game. Never seen that. So you have to have a condition to account for the 0 condition. When it's 0, don't let it go any lower. So you click the button. If the life count is greater than 0, subtract 1 from the life count and display the new life count in the upper right-hand corner, and then store the life counter. Obviously, if we don't do that, how are we supposed to remember how many lives we had? We have to have that. So we do the life counter store method. The other event down here is the countdown status. So this is what enables the clock to be visible. So by default, the clock is invisible. The only way for the clock to become visible is if the button is clicked, you lose a life. Now the countdown status was false. It gets set to true. Now it's true, and your tag, and you store the you set the countdown status back to true. So now this method can never be called again when the button's pushed until that flag gets set back to false, which the timers are the only ones that are capable of doing that. Once you have 3 lives again, then it will set it back. So you'll see all that in a second. Then you call the tiny db1 store value. You store the countdown status state, which will be now true. So this will never get called again when the app, when you push the button again and the app gets reinitialized and all of that good stuff. So you have to have a way to account for all of that, and this is our way. And now you set the time countdown to 35.99. That's not a coincidental number or anything like that. That's how many seconds are in an hour. 3600 is how many seconds are in an hour. We subtract 1 from that because of the way our counter system works. We want it to show 59.99 when we start our timer, and then after that it will start counting down in 1 second increments. So essentially our counter starts at 59 or 35.999, which is 59 minutes and 59 seconds. So and then from there it will count down, just to subtract the 60-minute whatever. I think if I had it at 60 minutes or 3600, it would actually be 3601 it would be counting from. So I had to add that extra second of wait. I had to just subtract that extra second of wait. Although you guys can do whatever you want. It's your application, whatever. All right, label 1 visible to true. That's the timer. I set that visible. The timer now exists. And then label 1.text is the floor function of global time countdown divided by 60. So this is where stuff gets a little tricky, because what I'm doing here is I'm dividing this by 60. Well, if I divide 35.99 by 60, I'm going to get like 59.9 something or another. I just want the 59 part. So I need to take the floor function of that. Floor in mathematics, if you guys don't know what the floor function means in math, essentially it means it doesn't matter how close my number is to the next integer, I will always round down to the nearest integer. So if I have 55.6, if I use the floor function on that, it will be 55. If I have 55.9, if I use the floor function on that, it will be 55. It doesn't matter what number or how many nines it has after it. It will always round down to the nearest integer. This is not a math lesson, so I'm not going to go any further into how that function works. It just rounds down to the nearest integer. Then I put a colon in there just to, create my timer, and then this math will get us the seconds. So minutes, seconds. That's the math. I'm not going to explain any more of the math because I could take forever trying to explain how the math works. If you have a particular question about the math, send me an email or leave a comment. All right, and then if the spinner selection is the phone time, set the global old time to clock dot set time, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So that's essentially just taking into account, hey, if you set the phone time, whatever, makes the old time equal to the clock system time. So one thing I want to mention before we get much further into this is these timers can conflict with each other when you're setting them. So if I change from one timer to another, it's going to conflict possibly with the timing method. However, what it will do is it might just reset the lives. In the case in point with the web counter, if I switch over to the web counter from any of the other timers, I think, especially from the phone timer, it resets the web timer. That's not a real flaw because these timers are not really designed to work together. You're never going to use all three of these timing methods really in an application like this where they're all controlling the same variables. You're really only going to use one of these methods. So if I was going to use the in-game method, I would delete all of the other stuff. If I was going to use the phone method, I would delete all of the other stuff. If I was going to use the web method, I would delete all of the other stuff and just have that one specific counter. So like I said, this is a demonstration. It's not something that's meant to work for everybody right out of the box. You would have to modify the code to make it work for your particular example. So I just kind of wanted to put that disclaimer out there. This is not a solution. This is a demonstration of different timer types. All three solutions live inside of it, but it is, in fact, a demonstration. All right, so in-game timer, back up to that. As soon as we click our button, the timer starts. We start counting. How does that counting down work? All right, global time countdown. If you guys remember, that's our 35.99. If it's greater than 0 and the life counter is less than 3, then we're going to start our timing process. If you look at my clock1.timer, it is set to 1,000. So every 1,000 seconds, it will do something. So this timer will not fire until 1,000 milliseconds, sorry, not seconds, has passed, which is 1 second. When the 1 second passes, it's going to fire off this event. And it's going to check these conditions, which will be true because if our life is less than 3 and we have a 35.99, blah, blah, blah. Then it's going to say, all right, the timer is equal to whatever the timer is now, minus 1. So it would go from 59.99 to 59.58, whatever. We re-update our counter status, and we restore the counter back in the database because if we don't do that, we lose, we create a timer now that loses its data when we close the application or turn our phone off. All right. If the timer is less than or equal to 0 and the lives are less than 3, well, that means, guess what? We hit 0:00 or 00:00. Our timer expired on our device. We have to have an event to reset the timer. So here's what will happen. If we go below 0 or we hit 0, we're going to add 1 to our life counter. So if I had 2, I would now have 3. Well, if I have 3, I have to have a way to account for that. My life counter is 3. I set everything false and set the global countdown status back to true, and everything stops counting. I'm back at 3 lives. I can play my game until I lose another couple lives, and then whatever. Then I can, whatever. So that's what happens if you have 3. Well, what if I don't have 3? What if I have 0? Well, 0, it just adds 1, resets the clock counter, redisplays the clock, resaves the lives, redoes all of that good stuff, and then it starts this whole method all over again. counting and counting and counting and counting, and then waiting until the timer hits 0. Once it hits 0, adds another one to the life. As soon as the lives hit 3, then everything is done. So that is essentially how the counter works. A lot of the stuff is repeatable. I probably could have put a repeatable here. I probably could have put some of the stuff in a procedure. I already explained this in previous videos, and I've had questions like this before. Why don't you put specific common blocks in procedures? Like I said before, I've said I'm just trying to create a solution. I'm not looking to sit here and optimize this code 100%. If I was creating my own application, which I have been and will be doing for a while now, I've been writing a couple applications that I'm probably going to try to demonstrate to you guys at some point, and probably put on the Play Store. But if I was doing that, then I would go through the effort of optimizing this stuff. But optimization takes time. I'm trying to get these videos up in a somewhat timely manner. So in order to do that, I have to just create something that works. I don't have time to go back through and clean it up. That's going to be your guys' responsibility if you choose to use this code. So, all right, that's essentially the in-game timer. That's how it works. Nothing really supremely complicated there, honestly. I think that's all pretty simple. It looks a lot more daunting than it actually is, but it's really not. It's pretty simple. So that's how that would work. Remember, this timer will only work when the application is running. We're starting to get a little drawn out, so I guess I'm going to get ready to chunk this video here in just a second. We're going to start explanation of the phone timer, probably go through that real quick, and then the last part of the video will be a demonstration, or part 2 will be a demonstration of the app, and it will be a demonstration of the final timing method, the web time, which is probably the most complicated, and that will take a lot longer to explain. Phone timer. Okay, phone time, advantage to phone time over in-game time is the counter counts. Okay, even when the phone is turned off, the counter will continue to count. I've already explained disadvantages to that. It's easily cheatable. All I got to do is change my automatic date and time. If that's all I got to do that, well then what the heck, that's not going to work for me. So I need to have a way to turn around and it's just whatever. Like I said, they all have advantages and disadvantages. That's just something you got to live with. It's life. It can easily be cheatable. But anyways, the phone timer, way it works, phone timer is this old method gets called if the phone timing is whatever. It initializes the clock. That's clock number 2. We already discussed all the rest of this stuff. So let's go over to clock number 2. That was not good. Let me plug that back into its socket. This should be clock number 2 over here. As you can see, it's already a lot more complicated. Really, I guess it's not really a lot more complicated. I'd say it's more complicated, but it's probably not a whole lot more complicated. Let me zoom in a little more so you guys can actually read the stuff. Man, oh man. So, that's something that wasn't even being used. Okay. Alrighty. So, global time countdown. So clock timer 2. You guys can kind of see here if I go back to the designer, which it takes a little while for me to toggle back and forth between these. I hope it hurries up. But timer number 2 is not set to the same standard as timer number 1, where timer number 1 was 1,000 seconds. Timer number 2, I think I set it to like 100 or something milliseconds. Yeah, this one's set to 100. Clock 3 set to 10, so that updates a little more frequently. But this one's set to 100, and the reason why is because it's not working off the same principle. This is timing within the app. This is just reading the phone time. I need to read the phone time pretty quickly, so I needed to pull it faster. So I'm pulling this clock 10 times faster. This event fires essentially 10 times faster. So now, global time countdown greater than 0 and life counter less than 3. Essentially the same logic that we used in the first timer. Instead of doing it the way we did it before, though, we have to add some extra blocks. We have to look at the system time and the old time and compare those two and see if they're greater than 1,000. Why greater than 1,000? That's how greater than 1,000 is 1. That's 1 second. This is the milliseconds for the time. So the clock system time is the clock's time in milliseconds. It's the clock time since counting back from like, it's the milliseconds since like January 1st, I think, of 1970. So it's how many milliseconds have passed since that time. That's what that time is. We have to initialize this global temp counter, which is the clock 2 system time minus the global old time divided by 1,000. This just takes the difference between the time we had last time, the time we have now, divides that by 1,000, and gets a time, which can be, it's in seconds. So this obviously, these are both in milliseconds. Dividing them by 1,000 turns them into seconds. Then I latch the system time to what the old time is now. If I don't do that, I'm not updating my old timer. I want to make sure, that I stay current, whatever. So I have to do that. Every time I call this stuff, I need to re-update my time. Now, global time countdown is equal to the global time countdown minus the floor function of the temp counter. If we look at what the temp counter is in seconds. It's the difference between the old time and the system time divided by 1,000. So that's how many seconds has passed since the last time the system time was ran, updated, and the global old time, was compared. So that's how many seconds have elapsed. When the app's running, it should be 1 second at a time, but if I close the app, it might be 15, 20, or even 30 seconds, or even maybe 59 minutes that's passed. So this number can really be as big as, and it can be as big as anything, really. So just so you guys are aware of that, this is not designed to update just 1 second at a time. It's designed to update 30 to 40 to 50 minutes or whatever at a time. So now, if the same logic's used here, if our timer's less than 0, we have to have a life counter. The life counter logic works differently here, though. Most of the time, and if the app, not even most of the time, if the app is running, we're only going to add 1. However, if the timer went much greater than 1, so maybe 3,600 seconds has passed again, so that would mean we would have 2 lives. So if this was 3,600 or 3,599 is what I'm using as my number here, that would be +1, which would be 2, and that would add 2 to the life counter. So if I had 1 life and 2 hours passed, then I would have 2 lives. That's what this logic essentially does here. Same thing, it could be 3. So just so you guys are aware, this whole statement is designed to take into account how much time has passed, and if enough time has passed to regain all 3 lives from 0, it can do that. So that's what this whole statement is, and why it's not just adding 1. It's designed to update all of the lives if need be. I think we're going to discuss the rest of this block, and that's going to be it for this video. So global time counter, same thing. If it's greater than or equal to 3, we're going to set it to 3. So since this number could be far greater than 2, in practice, we don't want it to be greater than 2, but I don't really put bounds on it. So if 15,000 seconds have passed, well, 15,000, less 35.99 from that. We take the math here, we do that, we add it. This could be 3, this could be 1, and if this is already 1, that's 4 or 5. That's 5, or that's 3, 1, that's 5. That would be 5 for your lives. Well, we said in our game, we don't want the lives to ever be greater than 3. So if they're greater than 3, we want to set it back to 3. So we have to have a way to turn around and say if the timer went way beyond, like it's been a whole year since this person played this game, then we have to have a way to reset the lives back to what the game bounds them to. That's 3. So that's the reason for that logic. Set the label 1, which is the timer, to false, the global countdown status to false, restore the countdown state. If the lives are not greater than 3, then we turn around and we have to account for the seconds that have passed beyond 35.99. So if 4,600 seconds have passed, well, 35.99, counting down from 35.99 seconds gives us 1 life. Well, 4,600 seconds have passed, although that's 700 seconds, whatever. That's like what, 5, 6, 10. That's like 10 minutes or something, 10 or 11 minutes, whatever. You have to account for that. You're not going to turn around and just reset the timer and not account for them 11, 12 minutes that passed, right? You have to have a way to account for that. That's what this does. That says this takes whatever the timer countdown is, subtracts all them seconds. This number can be negative. If this number does go negative, we have to have a way to recover from that, from how negative it is. And that's what these two sets of statements do, is they reset the timer to help, make it to where the timer's not negative, and it accounts for all the old time. So that's what these two blocks do, all the time that's passed beyond 35.99. So that'll only be called if the life counter is less than 3. You have to use this logic in order to, whatever. This logic, though, might only work for 3 lives. I haven't really tested it with anything greater than 3. So if you decided to have a game with 5 or 6 lives, these blocks may or may not need to be changed. I have not tested that. I know they work right now with 3, and that's kind of the way I left it. So then we store value, life counter, get global life counter, label text 2 lives, update the life count or the lives on the screen. Update the time. This is what updates the time block. Store all that information, the timer countdown, the old time. And then here is a block that does something different than what this block does. Something a little bit different for us here. If I decide to fake the clock and I decide to change it forward, obviously none of my logic in here can prevent you from doing that. You're going to reset all your lives if you do that. I already tried it, and I was able to do it and reset all of my lives by cheating the phone clock. However, if I decide to go back, if I set my clock forward, all this logic's going to account for all the forward time. Well, if I decide to reset my time back, now I have to have a way to account for the back in time stuff. That's what this does. This block here accounts for back in time. So it's going to reset. Basically, it's going to say the system time. The only time the system time can be less than what my old time was would be if I set my timer back. Well, if I set my timer back, now this number is going to be negative. If this number is going to be negative, all we want to do is just say, hey, the number's negative. Set the global old time to the new system time so we can actually redo the clock and make the clock function the way it's supposed to again. So, and then we just store the old time again. So probably the simplest block, just accounting for negative time if somebody decided to manipulate the phone clock logic, whatever. All right, that's going to be it for this video. Part 2 will be posted not too long after this. Please like, comment, subscribe, leave any suggestions. I am opening the floor to people to be able to, as always, you've always been able to send me private emails. I've had a couple people that have reached out to me now and asked me to build certain parts of their application for them as almost like a contractor type of a deal. I will do that for you. Obviously, depending on what it is you're asking me to do, I might have to charge some money for that if you don't want it to be public. If you want it to be something private that I do for you in private, I will have to charge for it. If you want it to just be something that you want a tutorial on, then that's public stuff. I will post that to my YouTube channel. That stuff is free. So tutorial stuff will be free. Anything that's not and you want it to be private, I'm probably going to have to start charging you guys for that stuff. That takes a lot of time out of my schedule. So I have to have some way in order to be able to do that for you. I have to charge you guys. So it's just the way the world works, unfortunately. Anyways, if you guys are interested in that live streaming stuff, please leave comments. I need probably at least 100 of you to say yes. I might consider like 50. Anything less than that, really, and it's not going to be worth it, because I figure on a regular basis I might get 10 of you on a Saturday. I need at least 100 of you to say it's interested, and probably at least 10 to show up on to these events on the Saturday or whatever day we decide in order for it to be worth it. So you guys can send me an email and say you're interested. I might create some kind of a voting thing on my channel so you guys can vote up whether you'd be interested in that and what your time would be that you suggest. And then I will go from there. So, all right, thanks guys. All right, see you in the next tutorial.